Today we're going to cover the 4 different types of income and some of the things you may not be familiar with each of them. And I hope to give you some inspiration to learn more ways you can make money. In 2014, when local janitor Ronald Reed had passed away, he surprised his town of Brattleboro, Vermont, by leaving behind $6 million to his local library and hospital. Part of the reason this was surprising is because Ronald was a janitor for the local school system, and no one had really known that he was a multimillionaire. What Ronald did was he was an employee in a career that isn't maybe known for creating millionaires, but where he really excelled was being an investor, and he saved a large part of the money he earned for his entire life. He did retire at 74, and when he passed away at 92, he had almost $8 million in total wealth. This introduces us to the 4 different types of income. You can make money as an employee, you can make money as a freelancer or being self-employed, as a business owner, or as an investor. Let's talk about each. So as an employee, generally you show up to a company and you generally say, tell me what you want me to do, and then tell me how much you would pay for that. That's sort of the deal. You don't have a lot of control. You basically take the job that they offer you or go somewhere else. And what you'll find is this is a broad range of people, including CEOs. CEOs are often employees. I know they make a lot of money, but they do work for a business and they have to do the job that they're instructed to do. This is true for employees at McDonald's, as well as what you might consider even more white-collar workers at Facebook. I would also put Uber drivers in the category of being more like employees, as you'll see from the differences here. When you really talk about being a freelancer or being self-employed, you're talking about somebody who is now in charge of how much they work. They set their own prices for their work, but now they're responsible for finding their own customers, and they don't get paid unless they're working. Examples of freelancers or self-employed would be someone who owns a bakery, and basically when they're there baking and selling the goods, they're making money, but if they're home sick for the day, they're probably not making any money that day. As well as now a platform like Fiverr, where people can be a freelancer selling their own services, whether it's being an author, copywriter, a graphics designer, and so forth. What's really great about this is instead of being paid by a company and being told what to do, you're doing the things that you want to do, but you also have to find the right customers and earn the money. Next is a business owner. A business owner owns a proven business model, so they know how to make money, and then they hire employees to help them execute that. So generally they're telling the employees what to do to make this money, and the business owner themselves can make money when the business makes money, even if that person is not working. We're going to talk about that a little bit deeper. This includes anyone who's a business founder who started their own company. And last but not least, of course, is an investor. An investor uses their money to make more money, and they can obviously make money over time without working as their money is passively growing. And anybody can be an investor just by saving money. So in each of these categories, whether you're an employee, a freelancer, or a business owner, you're going to want to put aside some of the money you make into being an investor. An investor is not that complicated. It could be as easy as buying the S&P 500 index fund, which invests in the top 500 companies in the United States, and that has been a really reliable and steady way to make money in the stock market for the past 100 years or more. So let's look at employees. Employees are probably people you know. Most people today are working for a company. So that could be true if you're a construction worker, or it's true if you're an office worker. And I love the movie Office Space here. But here's some of the famous quotes. You will never get rich working for someone else. And let me explain a little bit of why that is. When you look at how much a company like Apple makes per employee, Apple's revenue is $2 million per employee. And they're only paying these employees $20 to $30 an hour if they're a retail worker, or between $100,000 to $200,000 a year salary for some of their technical engineers. And so what this says is they make $2 million per employee now. But we do know that last year Apple had $168 billion in profit with only 137,000 employees. So that's enough to give every employee a raise of over $1 billion per year each, and Apple would break even as a company. But they're not doing this. They're not paying out all the profit. So the massive record profits companies report every year is what the employees have generated for wealth for the company that the company is not compensating the employees for. And so that's why those quotes, you may not get rich working for a company. And that's true for anyone who's an employee. So corporations are generally set up to make the owners and the executives and CEOs of the company very wealthy, almost on the backs of the employees who are doing a lot of the hard work. So now let's talk about a freelancer and a self-employed. This includes authors, like Seth Godin. I think Seth Godin has done a really good job of explaining how he's chosen to be a freelancer or self-employed instead of a business owner. He does that by writing books. He has podcasts and so forth. He's a great freelancer if you're interested in following anybody in that space. But also, here's Jennifer from Fiverr, who left her job as an employee and started making $100,000 a year on Fiverr, doing the same thing she was doing for much less pay from her employer. Now let's look at a business owner. Here's a business owner, which is Miss Excel. Miss Excel, if you haven't followed her, she's making millions of dollars a year by teaching people how to level up their Excel skills. Now, if she was just making money off of posting content, you could say that she was a freelancer or self-employed, because the day she stops posting content, the money stops coming in. But she's actually set up a business around her own social media where she's selling courses about Excel to businesses and employees that want to learn more about Excel. And so she actually does have a lot of passive income support around her. She's hired graphics designers and video editors and so forth. She now has a team. She's become more of a business owner, has been extremely successful. And really, for me, the idea of a business is if you stopped working for it as the business owner, you have people in place to keep it going and making money even when you're not working, which, Miss Excel is definitely more on the business owner side than freelancer side. And of course, not to be forgotten, all of us can be investors. So the most famous investor probably of this generation is Warren Buffett, who started, I believe, buying stocks when he was 8 years old. And then, of course, the example here of Ronald Reed, who was a great investor with his money. So it's not about how much money you make, it's how much you keep and invest. And Ronald was a great example of that. So here's another quote. If you don't build your dream, someone else will hire you to help them build theirs. And I think that's true about being an employee. With an example of Tanya Hicks. So Tanya Hicks, this is a great article if you have a chance. She's an electrician in Atlanta, and she faced a lot of challenges in an industry that's primarily dominated by men. And she rose to now starting her own electrician business. And there's a great background there, but I want to use this as a bit of an example. So imagine you're Tanya, you're an electrician, and you finish your apprenticeship or journeyman certificates, and you get hired by a local company to do electrician work. And this is an example pretty close to what recently happened that I saw. So let's say there's a $2,000 job, and it takes you 3 hours to install a new electrical panel, to run some wires, to put in a hot tub, run some wires and all that good stuff. So there's a $2,000 job. Tanya, as an employee, might make about $80 an hour or $240. However, on that $2,000 job, her employer might make $600 in markups for parts and labor. So Tanya is working and she only gets $240 when there's $840 of profit in that one job, most of it going to the business owner, which we actually saw with some of the examples earlier as well. So if Tanya gets really good at her job and has clients who are saying, oh, we'd love to have you back, we have these other projects, can we work directly with you? Eventually, Tanya might get well known enough to actually move out onto her own. So she becomes a freelancer And now she's self-employed. Instead of being hired by a company to go and do work, she gets phone calls herself from people who know her and say, we know you do great work. We want to hire you. So now, if she's doing that same $2,000 job that takes 3 hours, Tanya, as a freelancer, is making $80 per hour, sorry, $240. Plus, she makes the $600 markups for parts and labor. And now, instead of making $240 in those 3 hours, she's making $840 in those hours. And Tanya might do this for years. There's nothing wrong with being a freelancer or self-employed. But let's say Tanya gets to the point where she's so popular as an electrician in town that literally more people are calling her for projects than she can do. So eventually she's going to hire more electricians to work for her so she can fulfill all the demand she has for her time. Now she'll have to train them and make sure they do as good a job as she does with her special skills. But now she's become a business owner. So if we look at Tanya, the business owner, now she has employees that go out and do the job, and they'll make $240, but Tanya will make the $600 as a business on the markups for parts and labor, and she didn't even go to this job. So she might have in a day 10 different employees out of different projects, and Tanya's making money running the business. Now that's not to minimize how much work it takes to be a business owner. At this point, Tanya's job is to make sure that the clients keep coming and there's projects to give her employees to make them all fill their hours and have good incomes. And that's not easy. But when Tanya gets to the point where so many people want her services and she can't do it all by herself, that's when she hires people and she becomes a business owner. So now she's not trading her time for money. She's making money as a business owner. And of course, in all of these phases, whether it's Tanya, the employee, the freelancer, or the business owner, she can also be an investor. So the important thing here is to make sure that you are putting money aside to invest, to have the growth, so that while you're doing the work, your money is also working for you to make even more money, as if it was your own employee. So let's go through some of the differences here. As an employee, you're getting money primarily from salary and wages, and companies aren't necessarily paying you what your work is worth. As you've seen, Apple and even CVS makes about $1 million a year per employee in revenue, but they're only paying their retail workers maybe $30,000, $40,000 a year to work in the stores. So you're primarily, as an employee, paid your replacement value, what it would cost them to get someone else with similar skills in the same job. And that's where often becoming a freelancer or self-employed, people can make more money because they're actually paid closer to the value of the services or products that they provide. But then it comes with some trade-offs, which is you actually have to find the customers instead of having a company line them up for you. A business owner can make money off the profits of the business. And then obviously an investor makes money off of the dividends, interest, and even capital gains, which means the growth of the investment over time. In terms of control over the work, employees have pretty limited control over the work. They're hired to do specific jobs by an employer. They're often directed by the employer and given a specific schedule to work. Whereas a freelancer, you can set your own schedule. You also get to choose your own clients, who you work with, who you don't work with. And you have a lot more control, but you also have a lot more responsibility in trying to find that work. A business owner obviously has a lot of control over their work. They make the decisions for the business as to what the work they do and how the business moves forward and makes money. An investor, their control over their work is primarily what they invest in. And once you invest in something, it's pretty passive. The investment or the index fund and so forth, or the specific stock they buy, dictates how well it returns. In terms of risk level, there's actually pretty low risk to being an employee, which is why I believe most people end up starting and just being employees their entire lives. You're given a consistent income. You are dependent on your company's ability to actually stay in business. And there's often times where with economic downturn, there's layoffs and so forth. But compared to everything else on the list here, working as an employee is pretty low risk. There's more risk involved in being a freelancer. Your income can fluctuate as to when you get projects and when you can find clients. And if that dries up and you can't find the next project, then there's no money coming in. So while you can, I think, get paid more for every piece of work that you do, you are now responsible for finding the next work and the work after that and the work after that. The risk level for a business is high. As you know, most businesses fail in the first year or the first 5 or 10 years. And so it takes some time to figure out a business that is successful. And once the business is successful, there are always financial and operating risks in terms of changes to the business. We know through the pandemic, certain businesses did better while other stores had to close down and so forth. And as an investor, there's pretty low risk. It depends on the type of investment and the market conditions. As I mentioned, the S&P 500 index fund is probably the lowest risk investment you can make while still exposing yourself to the stock market. Benefits and perks of being an employee includes health insurance, retirement plans, and paid leave. But just think about what that means. Is the benefit is you get to take some time off when you want to. Usually that's just 2 weeks a year. Whereas a freelancer, there's no benefits. You have to pay for all your insurance. You have to pay for, when you take a day off, you are not making money. But you have much more control and flexibility over your schedule. Business owners, they again provide the businesses and the benefits for themselves and their employees, but it's up to them. So instead of doing what the employer provides, they are the employer and can decide what to give each of their employees. And there's no necessarily benefits or perks from becoming an investor. Work-life balance for an employee, it's defined by the job role and the employer's requirements. I know there's plenty of jobs, and let's just use an example of a doctor or a surgeon, that it's very demanding, very time-consuming, and doesn't leave much time for work-life balance. But then there are people who work part-time as an employee and find that at 5 o'clock when the end of the day comes, it's pretty easy to unplug and forget about work until the next day. For work-life balance for the freelancer, it is flexible so that you have control of the hours. You can work at regular hours. You can only be open on the weekend if you want to do a certain bakery or a yoga studio. But often it's hard to leave the work behind. It's always your business. And if there's an issue with a flood in the building, for example, or a power outage, at any time you may be working on keeping your bakery open even during the weekend. Business owners, if you own a business, it can be pretty demanding on your personal life and can often overshadow personal time, as a business always has needs and fires going on, and you never know what you'll have to tackle. And in terms of work-life balance, investors have the most flexibility. It's just the passive investment. You basically invest with money and then wait and see how it returns. So growth potential for an employee is pretty limited to career progression within a company or industry. It's up to the company as to whether there are promotions and whether you can move forward and actually earn more or not. A freelancer, there's probably no specific promotion or career. Your growth really comes from getting more clients and being hired to do more work and take on more work in that case. And there's going to be some point as a freelancer where you can't do any more work in a given week, and you'll have to hire employees to help you do that. And that's where you become a business owner. So the growth potential for a business owner is actually pretty high. A business can grow and scale significantly by hiring more employees to take on the work and take over new clients. And that's how these large corporations have 100,000 employees. Walmart has 2.3 million employees in the United States. And then an investor's growth potential is pretty high. There's really no limit to the amount of money you could make on an investment. If you get into riskier investments, they could have potentially higher upsides with compounded interest over a long period of time. Financial security for an employee, I'll say that that's actually pretty close to paycheck to paycheck. I think most Americans as employees are not financially secure and don't have a lot of savings, and in a way that's the way the system is built, as we showed in some of the data. And I think that's unfortunate, and that's also why 44% of people in the United States say they have a side hustle, as they might drive for Uber or do work on Fiverr or sell things on Etsy, to try and make more money. The financial security to a freelancer or self-employed is actually pretty low. It's tied to your ability to secure and maintain clients and people who want to hire you to do the work that you do. Similar to for businesses, the financial security of the business and the health of the business is linked to the business performance and other competitors and things in the market. And the financial security for an investor, it depends on the investment choices, but there are more conservative investments that they can invest in that make it pretty reasonable over time. You just have to have the money up front. So now I want to dig into a little bit of this. So I want to wrap up with some thoughts to consider across the 4 different types of incomes here. The first one is save more money, and an example would be in index funds like the S&P 500. And if you want to retire around 65, you're going to want to save 10% of your paycheck every time until you retire at 65. If you want to retire earlier, you might have to put away something like 20% of your paycheck to be able to retire at 55, starting from when you first get your job and so forth. So definitely you want to save as much as you can. Now, that can be reduced because maybe your employer has a matching 401k contribution, or they have other ways that they give you bonuses and things. Make sure you're putting that into retirement and investments. The other thing to think about is to explore a side hustle. So as I mentioned, Zapier reports that 40% of Americans have a side hustle. And I think for all of the reasons identified here in this video, there's a lot of good opportunities for you to make more money for the work that you do when you become a freelancer or self-employed. Now, that doesn't mean quit your job today. It means while you're working in your job, are there things you can do in a side hustle on Fiverr or working for Uber and things like that to make extra money on the side? Thank you so much. This has been a production of Growth Vineyard, your home for personal development, growth, and success. Make sure you subscribe and follow us for more, and also check out one of these other videos.